Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint by Sing Shong. Chapter 241 Gourmet Association Part 5. Iris was confused. Originally, she was supposed to sign a contract with a constellation of Asgard. It was a lesser-grade constellation that wasn't well-known, and Iris didn't like the contract. That's why she participated in the bracelet expedition, hosted by Anna Croft. Anna said that if Iris showed a great performance here, Anna could change her intended sponsor. Now in this unexpected place, a chance came to Iris. The constellation Demon King of Salvation wants to establish a sponsor contract with you. Thinking about it, there was no way constellations could only contract with one incarnation. Some constellations had 2 or 3, depending on their capacity. Of course, the power of the constellation was divided, so the incarnations received weakened stigmas. Even so, Iris wasn't in a position to regret something like this. I accept. The constellation Demon King of Salvation states that this contract is only for a limited time. The constellation Demon King of Salvation states that this contract is valid until the end of the bracelet expedition. Temporary contract. Yes, now isn't the time to be greedy. Iris bit her lips and nodded. By the way, the words of the constellation weren't finished. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says there is a condition. The constellation Demon King of Salvation wants the wish to be transferred to him after the scenario is completed. Iris' mind was complicated. It was a temporary contract and he wanted the wish? A strange regret passed over her, but she wasn't in a position to pass up this chance. The Demon King of Salvation's condition was based on completing the scenario. It meant he would keep her alive, no matter what happened. I'll definitely give it to you. At the same time, a holographic contract descended in the air. Iris ran over and signed the hologram. The sponsor contract has been completed. Power flowed into her body, and she felt that someone was supporting her. She felt confident that she could do anything. However, Iris' confidence quickly disappeared at the cries from behind her. The incarnation hunting has begun. There were screams as incarnations were torn apart by evil spirits. Current number of expedition members remaining, 6 people. In the original novel, this game was called Hunting and Chasing. This wasn't a Gourmet Association event, it was an event hosted by Anna Croft. In this round, Anna Croft decided to skip the process and start from the Gourmet Association. I continued to mutter towards the air, and the mass production maker asked me, "Ho, you participated? Did you participate?" Hoo-hoo, I'm too old to run to scenarios like that. And, it doesn't suit my tastes. In fact, not all members of the Gourmet Association were enthusiastic about this scenario. On one side, there were the constellations who disliked Anna Croft. On another side, there were the constellations who disliked the event itself. I don't see your modifier on the list of evil spirits. There were 15 constellations who participated in the scenario. However, the number of constellations who chose the role of the evil spirit was only 14. I nodded, and the eyes of the mass production maker slowly widened. Indeed, there was a reason the old hag Persephone brought you here. But is it okay? You are here for the first time. I replied with a smile. The more brilliant my debut, the better. Then the system message arrived like it had been waiting. The storied Gourmet Association heretic has been acquired. Maybe Anna Croft would be listening to messages similar to mine. There is always a story in a place where many constellations gather. This was the first principle of generating a story. The level of the story was determined by combining the risk to the story subject and the form of the story. Anna Croft was currently an incarnation, and she was walking a tightrope. If her scenario was successfully completed, it might be a legendary story, such as Follower of the First Generation or Story Manipulator. I closed my eyes and saw what was happening with Iris. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is looking at his incarnation. I felt sorry when I saw her shaking shoulders, but I didn't have any good memories for this child. I wasn't good enough to show kindness to her. That's why this was just a gesture for trading. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says to stay calm. Iris gulped and replied, I don't know if I can do it. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says there is no hopeless scenario. All scenarios had holes to escape out of. The hole was small and tiny, so it was highly difficult to clear on the first try. This meant there was a chance to clear it after trying a few times, and I was a person who knew more about this world than anyone else. The sound of the evil spirits moving could be heard in the distance. Iris' physique was at the limit, and the only stigma I could pass on was sacrifice's will. Damn it, that stigma wouldn't help in the current situation. However, stigmas weren't the only things that constellations could give. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is giving his incarnation, the Assassination King's cloak. Iris was surprised to see the gift that emerged in the air. It was an item I bought for 150,000 coins from the Dakibi bag. It had a usage limit of 30 minutes a day and lacked the ability to deceive the constellations, but the current situation was different. Here, the constellations emerged from the grass as if they were waiting. The constellations that became evil spirits looked different. There were a giant horned demon and a spirit with a bull's head holding a small scythe. The only thing they had in common was that they had no feet and were shrouded in a black cloak. Strange. It was definitely around here. Did you see it properly? Iris disappeared, and the constellations who were evil spirits couldn't discover her traces at all. The constellations who played the role of evil spirits were under strong restrictions. The constellations in the role of the evil spirit could only 1/10 of their current status. For the constellations, a game wasn't fun if it was too easy. Just as there were no humans who would rejoice in stepping on 15 bugs. They didn't hesitate to impose constraints on themselves for entertainment. This was the constellations of the Gourmet Association. It seems she must have done something. Let her run a bit more. The scenario should be stacked up to taste better. Hoo-hoo, I'm looking forward to it. The constellations searching the grass soon gave up, and Iris received a system message. The expedition member Iris Vladimirovna Rebezova has survived an evil spirit once. The story Bracelet Expedition has accumulated. This scenario was made up of classic stories. The longer Iris stayed in the scenario, the more the energy of the classic story would permeate her. I lived. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says you were lucky this time. If these guys were high-ranking constellations, it would have been impossible to hide from them using the Assassination King's cloak. However, just like Persephone and the mass production maker, the really high-ranking Gourmet Association constellations wouldn't run like dogs towards this scenario. It was also interesting to watch other constellations vent their desires in this event. In other words, they were the real audience I should aim for. Thank you for the gift. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says it is alone. Yes. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is sympathetic to your incarnation. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband reproaches your harshness. The scenario would start from now on. As the number of expedition members continued to decrease, Iris moved towards the volcano while avoiding the eyes of the constellations. She also had the good luck of collecting the bracelet from the expedition members that died along the way. Current number of expedition members remaining, 2 people. It was natural since I was participating in the scenario while reading Ways of Survival in real time. It was because Ways of Survival contained a very detailed account of the Evil Blight bracelet, the prototype of this scenario. I analyzed the terrain using the scenario map and moved Iris along the most efficient path towards the volcano. Haha, this is a fun story. Wasn't there a lot of delicious food? I'm drooling. The other constellations seemed to notice that someone was involved on the expedition side. Nevertheless, none of them were panicked. The expedition member Merce Ludier has died. Shortly afterwards, Iris was alone. It smells delicious. The scattered evil spirits were gathering near the volcano. They knew that the last expedition member had to come to the volcano. Now the time of the Assassination King's cloak was almost up. I gave a signal to Iris. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says to do it now. Iris started running towards the volcano. I stared at the back of the running girl. All the constellations of the Gourmet Association were watching the little girl running with all her might. Perhaps everyone knew. This girl, she had no choice but to die here. She was 100 steps away from the volcano when the privilege of the Assassination King's cloak finally ended. The 10 evil spirits wandering around instantly gathered. I will eat first. Iris watched the incoming evil spirits and backed away with terror. Her last desperate gaze was towards the sky. The constellation Demon King of Salvation is asking to lend him your incarnation body. Iris gasped as her mouth opened. The constellation Demon King of Salvation says it isn't an advent. If I manifested in the form of an advent, I would also be constrained by the scenario. Thus, I wouldn't do it as an advent this time. I had a skill that was more efficient and consumed less probability. I deliberately pulled out a few stories that made up my incarnation body in order to deal myself a serious blow. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 3 has been activated. The first-person supporting role Viewpoint has been activated. Your understanding of Iris Vladimirovna Rebezova has increased. I opened my eyes to Iris' point of view. Maybe my body in the Gourmet Association was currently sleeping. Thus, I had to end this game in the shortest amount of time. Some constellations have noticed your presence. At the same time, there was an outpouring of true voices towards me. There was someone helping her. Who are you? Ho, is it an advent? This windfall. Iris received the accumulated stories and her body shone golden. I laughed bitterly as I looked down at myself. One way for a newcomer in the Gourmet Association was to grow step by step. However, if I dragged it on like that, I might not be able to reach the end of the story after 3,000 chapters. Did that Anna girl plan something? The person I just killed was a sword master. One constellation walking in the distance spoke as he threw the incarnation in his hands. Perhaps he was the last expedition member to die. You look like a new recruit. It is best for you to leave this place. Or else your body will suffer a great blow. The head of the dead expedition member rolled towards me. It was the head of the incarnation who fled to the end but eventually didn't survive. I carefully picked up the head and one of the constellations sneered. Do you pity him? Hoo-hoo, this guy doesn't know art. Why should their lives be your art? I stroked his head and the memories of the dead incarnation flowed in. The memory soon became a story that dwelt at my fingertips. A fragment of the story grudge of a brutally murdered sword master has been acquired. The constellations drew back with a frown. You like dirty stories. Dirty? You gave it to me. Why did this person easily become a sword master? It was simple. He originally received it from a constellation. The story is boring. The scenario is too slow. It is the power that all of you gave them. The things that were received gathered. Someone became a sword master. Someone became a great magician. Then the sword master and great magician became the sin. They all became the prey of these beings. What are you trying to do? Stop eating. A hot-tempered constellation raised the power of the evil spirit. Originally, Iris couldn't defeat them. The expedition could never win against the evil spirits. However, the evil spirit screamed and retreated from the burning sword. Quack! In my hand was the sword I had purchased along with the Assassination King's cloak. Plus, item information. Name, Eoran Sword Replica Rating, SS+, specific scenarios only. Description, a sword energized by a first-generation story. Only female incarnations can use it and it can generate a force that resists evil spirits for 10 minutes. Plus, it was a sword that cost 200,000 coins. It was also a sword that was useless apart from in this scenario. Normally it was an item I would never buy. A first-generation sword? Hey, don't be scared. It's just a replica version. In fact, I was really worried about it. Many constellations are astonished by your actions. I had wondered if it was worth taking this risk for this scenario. I measured what I could get from it. Some members of the Gourmet Association are showing a strong hostility to you. Some things should be calculated and some shouldn't. Then I made a choice. You knew I would come to the volcano. I decided not to calculate things. Then did you know? I also knew you would be gathering here. No matter what penalties were received or if the opponents were constellations. I couldn't afford to pay attention to it. Nevertheless, I smiled like always. Let's start the real hunting. Chapter 242. Gourmet Association. Part 6. There were 10 constellations gathered here. I didn't know where the remaining 4 were, but maybe they were scattered somewhere in the scenario area. If you don't yield, I'll eat you too. The true voices of the constellations flowed from the mouths of the evil spirits. I didn't hesitate and infused magic power into the sword. The exclusive skill White Pure Star Energy LV8 has been activated. It was Iris' magic power instead of mine. Still, Iris was an incarnation who came all this way and her potential was considerable. The white energy was added to Ioran's sword and the aura around it became more abundant. Ioran's sword was a weapon that could deal a powerful blow to evil spirits for 10 minutes. However, a powerful weapon didn't necessarily mean I would dominate this place. A constellation saw my sword and laughed. Haha, slow down. Small constellation. Please entertain these old people. What old people? I haven't lived 500 years yet. There are those older than us. Was it because this was the first time I was attached to a young girl's body? My sword could only draw a clumsy trajectory through the air. The constellations might not be able to use all their power, but a constellation was a constellation. They ranged from great grade to lesser grade. The constellations who gathered to become evil spirits released their status. Iris' movements started to stiffen as the 10 constellations released their energy. Her body thrashed like she was caught in an invisible spider web. The spiders who trapped her were approaching. I looked at Iris' body that was trembling regardless of my will and bit my lips. It was always like this, but this time would be different. Don't look down on me. I am also a constellation. So far, I had never properly released my status. I had been fighting my way through the demon world scenario in a sick state. However, I had been steadily recovering my stories while riding on the Gourmet Association's carriage. Thus, I might not be at a 100% state, but I could use a status that was almost equal to it. The constellation status is released. Some of my stories started responding to the situation. The history grade story Gourmet Association Heretic is rebelling against the surrounding oppression. The legendary grade story Demon King of Salvation is responded to Incarnation Iris situation. The surrounding ground was split apart with a loud sound and the nearby forest shook. The constellations were astonished by the flood of sparks in the area. In this scenario, the descended constellations could only use 10% of their power. On the other hand, I used Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint instead of Advent and was able to release my original status. How can a newcomer have this much status? Is this really the Advent state? The constellations didn't know this fact and were almost terrified. They were mistaking the current status as 10% of my original strength. It was the reason I was pushing myself in such an unreasonable manner. Either die or get lost. Choose one or the other. I had to get them right, not before they stopped being fooled. See, cheeky bastard. The star stream is really wide. Where did a guy like this pop up from? Some of the constellations shrank back from the pressure I gave off, while others were burning with enthusiasm. Kuhahahat. The best dish. Today's Gourmet Association Festival is the best. The constellations emitted terrible shrieks, and the arms of the evil spirits stretched towards this side. I hurriedly stepped back and swung my sword, but couldn't cut off the incoming arms. Iris' voice was heard in my head. Sorry. I'm a terrible swordsman. Shit. This was why my movements were like this. Blood splashed as Iris was wounded. Did they realize something from my movements? The momentum of the constellations was changing. Something is strange? The constellations spread out and carried out sporadic attacks using the bodies of the evil spirits. I tried to defend by swinging the sword, but it wasn't easy since Iris' swordsmanship skill level was too low. The result was quite different from when I was in Yu Jonghyuk's body. Once again, I realized how great Yu Jonghyuk was. Indeed. Only that guy's status is high. Get rid of him. There is no need to worry about the sword. Ha ha ha, today we will eat. The worst situation that I wanted to somehow avoid was unfolding. The attacks of the evil spirits flew from everywhere. There was a small scythe that grazed my legs. A boomerang turned around and aimed at my back. A long spear pierced through a gap and struck my side. In less than a minute, Iris' body was covered with wounds and bruises. My physical strength was rapidly dropping. I hurriedly opened Bookmark and Way of the Wind, but it felt awkward in Iris' body. Eventually, my footsteps became twisted up and I was disoriented. The constellations aimed for this short gap and stretched out their arms towards me. Quack. Iris was caught by the neck and hung helplessly in the air. You have bad luck, newcomer. The constellations acted like it was over as they opened their mouths. It is eating time. Grotesque fangs grew and digestive juices dripped from their mouths. Since they could customize the appearance of the evil spirits, it was really the worst taste. I opened my mouth without hesitation. I will activate the 5th bookmark. In fact, I didn't want to use this skill here. I wasn't sure if Iris' body could endure it, nor did I want to consume an excessive amount of probability. Nevertheless, there was no other way. The 5th bookmark is activated. The moment that bookmark was activated, an unexpected message arrived. The skill is not suitable for this person. The exclusive skill miniaturization is cancelled. The exclusive skill electrification is cancelled. The power of bookmark disappeared with the sound of sparks. Sometimes a skill wasn't compatible with the chemistry of the body. But why did it have to happen now? I never expected this. Is this your last hurrah? Yes, give it a try. Along with the ridiculing voice, a long tongue slipped out from the mouth of the evil spirit and started to strangle Iris' throat. My prayers were blocked and I turned blue. I could feel Iris' consciousness blurring. The connection with Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint was weakening. The attribute effect has accelerated your thinking ability. Dozens of thoughts crossed my mind during this crisis until something was caught in the net. I didn't know if it was possible. My understanding of the character was still low. Still, I could try it. I will release Knight of Revolution Mark Javier from the 6th slot. I released my status as much as possible and instantly escaped from the capture of the constellation. Then I continued speaking. I will place the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint Namgung Minyoung in that spot. The number 6 bookmark is activated. An immense presence permeated me. I felt all the things I've read, felt and experienced become one and nestle in my body. Your understanding of this person is insufficient. It felt like the first time I loaded Kyrios Rodgrain. What? What power is this? Astonishment filled the eyes of the Gourmet Association constellations. The level of the character is too high to fully reproduce the skill level. The level of the character is too high, so only a part of the skill is activated. The duration of the bookmark is reduced due to a low understanding of the character. The original Breaking the Sky swordsmanship was a skill that could only be used by women. Yu Jonghyuk overcame it with effort, but it was unreasonable for me. Your current body configuration is similar to the physical makeup of the character in question. To be exact, it would have been impossible with my original body. The exclusive skill Breaking the Sky Swordsmanship LV10+1 has been activated. Thunder fell from the sky and nestled in Eorin's sword. I released the maximum amount of power possible at the optimum time. Everything was over before the constellations even noticed the situation. The exclusive skill Breaking the Sky Thunder Sword LV10+1 has been activated. The blue thunder that could overturn the earth flew from the sky and struck everything in the area. The words of ways of survival passed through my head. The Murim don't consider the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint as one of the 10 Grand Masters. TL changed Teenage Masters to 10 Grand Masters. The bodies of the evil spirits scattered into ashes without even screaming. The Murim people think of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint as a type of disaster. Born as a small human and facing the constellations after hard work. This was the strength of the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint, a disaster of Murim. The skill has exceeded the talent of the incarnation body. I felt something twisting as blood flowed. The result was obvious. It was a force that Iris and I couldn't use, because we weren't transcendents. The sky blinked like a power failure had occurred. The dazzling thunderbolts disappeared and there were no evil spirits left in the surroundings. The constellation Brash Swamp Predator has been eliminated from the scenario. The constellation Tranquil Island Gourmet has been eliminated from the scenario. The constellation Forgotten Lord of Envy has been eliminated from the scenario. A total of 10 constellations have been eliminated from the scenario. You have earned an unbelievable achievement. A series of impossible feats have been accomplished in a row. I was barely breathing as I looked up at the sky. The star stream is paying attention to your achievements. A new story for you is being prepared. The constellation's status might have been extremely limited, but they still massacred the incarnations. Thus, there was no way I wouldn't get a story. Blood emerged from my mouth while pouring simultaneously from my ears and nose. Blood poured out from many holes, and I almost became used to the taste. Fortunately, the probability allowed by the Gourmet Association meant I could still endure. I plastered Iris' broken body with fragments of the story. The shock from the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint's technique had already caused Iris' consciousness to disappear. The constellations of the Gourmet Association are astonished by the contents of the scenario. Some constellations of the Gourmet Association have become hostile to you. I knew I would be hated. However, there was always something to gain from losing something. Some constellations of the Gourmet Association are very curious about your story. Some constellations of the Gourmet Association feel favorable towards you. I stumbled away with Iris' body and headed towards the volcano. Iris would survive once the scenario was completed. In order to complete the scenario, I had to throw the bracelet into the volcano lava. There wasn't much distance remaining. 40 steps, 30 steps, 20 steps. My face became hot as I neared the lava. The cliff that I could throw the bracelet was clear when I felt someone's presence. I expected them to appear now. There were still 4 evil spirits that I hadn't finished off. Demon King of Salvation, you are doing something really interesting. The familiar voice entered my ears as I tightly gripped Ioran's sword. I looked back and a familiar-looking girl stood there. She was an evil spirit, but her basic appearance hadn't changed at all. I opened my mouth. Asmodeus. Asmodeus was ecstatic, as if feeling pleasure that his name was called. Ah, let me call you again. The person who damaged Yu Jonghyuk's body and was the main culprit behind the 3rd round failing. I felt Asmodeus' status slowly approaching. This was the power of only 10%. As expected, one of the 72 demon kings was on a different dimension. I took a step back and vigilantly watched my surroundings. It was still a difficult situation. Even if I removed this guy, there were still 3 more evil spirits remaining. My chances of winning were gone if they came. So before that, don't be so vigilant. There are no other constellations. 3 small heads were hanging from the small hands of the smiling Asmodeus. The black cloak billowed around the severed heads. They weren't the heads of incarnations. A chill rose very slowly from the tip of my toes. In this brief moment, I understood why. Asmodeus was described as a madman in ways of survival. There was a cold smile on Asmodeus' face that was smeared with the blood of constellations. I devoured all of them. Chapter 243. Gourmet Association. Part 7. He ate all of them. There was no guilt on Asmodeus' smiling face as he spoke such words. Several members of the Gourmet Association are strongly condemning Asmodeus. A small minority of the Gourmet Association are delighting in Asmodeus' brutality. The members of the Gourmet Association were worn out by the years, and they varied in tendencies and taste. At first glance, the first-generation stories seemed the best, but there were some constellations like the mass-production maker who preferred SSS-grade stories while others liked unexpected developments like now. The body of a constellation has a different physical quality. It isn't real but. This was why demon kings like Asmodeus were accepted in the Gourmet Association. Constellations, transcendents, or demon kings, the Gourmet Association was a place where stubborn children were more concentrated than any other group, but they respected all types of gourmet delights. I gulped as Asmodeus stepped into puddles of blood and slowly approached. The special effect of Ioran's sword will end. I might have used the breaking the sky sword saint's techniques, but it worked properly, thanks to Ioran's sword. Without the sword, there would be no way to deal with the evil spirits. After half a dozen steps, Asmodeus licked his lips as he stared at me. I stated, "You didn't come here to eat me." How can you be sure? You can't get the giant story if you kill me. Asmodeus made a promise to me regarding the Demon King advancement. Thus, he couldn't kill me here. I promised a 30% stake. Why are you in this place? There is no certainty that I will receive 30%. Do you not have the confidence to compete with the other constellations? Asmodeus' expression hardened at my provocative words. Now you are provoking me? Asmodeus had a threatening air, but I didn't feel nervous. If you are really a demon king, don't be a pushover. Compete properly to obtain your share. In the first place, it was apparent that Asmodeus had appeared here to help me. He might be Asmodeus, but the act of attacking fellow members of the Gourmet Association couldn't help being burdensome. Even so, he acted in such a manner while pretending to be a maniac. Asmodeus' complexion paled as he shouted, "Demon King of Salvation. You seem to be mistaken about something. I can eat you right now. Don't repeat the same words and get the fuck out." Asmodeus' eyes widened. I continued without stopping. If you really want to eat me, kill me right now. The past me would have thought I was crazy if he saw this. This was Asmodeus, not someone else. Nevertheless, there was a reason I acted like this. The status of Asmodeus burned towards me. I got goosebumps from the formidable force, but believed in the story that I read more than my senses. At that time, we should have treated Asmodeus differently. The revised version of Ways of Survival. I had found such a sentence in the 49th Ujonhuk's record. Asmodeus loves beings who don't compromise. The more he faces such a being, the greater the desire to beat them. I didn't know how Ujonhuk gained such insight, but if he was right, all of Asmodeus' actions were understandable. Your understanding of the character Asmodeus has increased. Then a phenomenon occurred. Your understanding of the character Asmodeus has increased. Your understanding of the character Asmodeus has increased. The explosive indirect messages occurred as I started to understand the inner surface of a demon king for the first time. Exclusive skill, Omniscient Reader's Viewpoint Stage 2 has been activated. I want to eat. No. I want to eat. No. Ah. A tremendous amount of thoughts rushed into my ears. It was appalling that so much greed could exist in one being. It is really amazing. Asmodeus moved like the wind as he held a handful of iris hair and took a slight breath. Good. Yes, this is enough for today. Still, keep this in mind, Demon King of Salvation. Next time won't be the same as today. I didn't listen to Asmodeus' words and ran towards the volcano. I couldn't miss this opportunity that I had barely gained. The lava could be seen right in front of me. Way of the wind caused the bracelet at my fingertips to fall down the cliff. The bracelet melted with a clear sound. The sub-scenario has ended. You have obtained 150,000 coins as compensation. Your awareness in the Gourmet Association has greatly increased. You have acquired a new story. I poured the Elaine Forest essence into the mouth of the completely exhausted Iris. Her physical condition was a mess, but recovery would be fast due to not consuming much probability. The first-person supporting role Viewpoint has been released. There was the feeling of my environment being crushed, and I returned to the banquet hall of the Gourmet Association. My senses returned, and the first thing I heard was the voice of an old man. Young man, I enjoyed it. I realized I had returned when I saw the mass production maker laughing heartily. I looked at him for a moment before slightly bowing my head. It is all thanks to you. HRMM, what are you talking about? It is this. My hand was holding the 200,000 coins of garbage that Iris used just now, Yoren's sword. For reference, the grip of the sword had the following message engraved. Made by mass production maker. The mass production maker laughed. It was just business. Who knew that sword would be sold today? It was a recommended product in the Dakibi bag. Hoo-hoo, how can a constellation know about the work of Dakibis? I didn't know if this was the consideration of the mass production maker or not. One thing was for certain. This sword had saved the lives of Iris and I. By the way, things have become a bit difficult. I looked around. The atmosphere around me was tense. Who is the demon king of salvation? The constellations were running wild as they looked for me with fiery anger. Among them was the constellations who had lost their bodies and returned from the scenario. The constellation Brash Swamp Predator reveals hostility towards you. The constellation Tranquil Island Gourmet is glaring at you. Euphrosyne was standing dumbfounded on the stage, while Anna Croft was pale. Now some of the constellations were watching me while wondering what I was going to do. The sub-scenario was over, but for them, this situation was an extension of the game. Of course, I wouldn't betray their expectations. You have gained the wish ticket according to the contract with the incarnation Iris. You can make one wish within the category allowed by the Gourmet Association. It was within the category allowed by the Gourmet Association. The meaning of this was obvious. I naturally couldn't wish for the constellations to be killed. This is beyond the probability allowed by the wish. I couldn't wish for all the constellations to be on my side or to be their master. It was naturally a wish that wasn't possible. This is beyond the probability allowed by the wish. In other words, this wish was a type of diplomatic card. I had to identify the possible and impossible areas and find the best wish for me. Some members of the Gourmet Association are showing a strong hostility to you. Many constellations are looking forward to your choice. Even the constellations in my channel were tense. The constellation Prisoner of the Golden Headband is looking forward to your choice. The constellation Demon-like Judge of Fire is wriggling her fingers in a trance. In front of all these eyes, I slowly opened my mouth. I wish that the Gourmet Association will show me courtesy. For a moment, a tremendous silence filled the hall. I didn't panic and looked around in the silence. The probability of the Gourmet Association is activated. Your wish has been received. Sparks filled the hall of the Gourmet Association. No, looking closer, they were thunderbolts, not sparks. Then a loud voice was heard. Hoo-ha-ha-hot. A really fun guy. Thursday's Thunder was holding a glass of beer while laughing. A story that was boring became worthwhile to see a bit. Why are you complaining about and persecuting this small constellation? Some of the constellations rebelled strongly against his words. But the rules. The scenario is just a scenario. In addition, that scenario has ended. That's all that my hammer and I know. Thor's hammer made a deafening sound like it wouldn't accept any arguments. Thor of the Asgard Nebula had one of the most powerful stories in this place. No one here wanted to resist his hammer. It is unpleasant to agree with this rough Thunder's words, but this time I feel the same. The person who spoke was the morning star goddess. Star powder fell from her finely twisted hair as she moved. The scenario should end in the scenario. If you want to fight, fight in the scenario. I don't want to see the Gourmet Association becoming uglier. The two top-ranking constellations present stood up, so the other constellations couldn't help wavering. Moreover, the wish ticket had already been activated. Some of the constellations were still glaring at me, but they showed no signs of hurting me. The atmosphere calmed down, and the eyes of the morning star goddess turned to me. Still, I would like to ask one thing. It was an unexpected question, and I reflexively looked at her. Demon King of Salvation. Why are you showing us such a scenario? The eyes of the goddess seemed to contain a galaxy. Now they show like she had found a new star. In my eyes, you seem to have something to say. However, my eyes are dark and I can't figure out the scenario you showed me. If you don't mind, I'd like to hear it from your mouth. She didn't say that the scenario I showed was crude, and this was probably due to her innate humility. I could see Persephone smiling at me from beside the morning star goddess. I told you to do things yourself, and this is the only way I can help you. All the constellations of the Gourmet Association were looking at me. It was the situation I had been wanting since I came here. What should I say to gain favor with them? It would be stupid to think they would help me if I just brought up the Demon King selection story. At that moment, Kim Dokja thought for the first time about what he really wanted to say. It was too far away and not yet visible. However, for at least one person who walked on the path, it was clear. He failed thousands of times while feeling frustrated and desperate. There was someone who tried to take this road before me. I recalled the man who walked on the road that no one else walked on and laughed. Then I very naturally came up with some words. No, perhaps this was the only thing I had to say.